everyone, welcome to our channel. I'm Kate.
And I'm Stephanie.
And together we're Three Heads. Today we're talking about student directions, how to write directions to get what you want. When your students are not producing the type or quality of work that you want to see, it could be because your directions are not specific enough. You're not asking exactly what you want them to produce. So this builds on a conversation that we had in a recent podcast, which we will include in the links down below, about how to get students to meet your expectations. So the first thing that we like to do in our directions is explain to students the purpose of the assignment. What is it that we want them to get out of this particular activity? We have gotten away from having students do any type of work that just is a standalone.
Yeah.
Everything has a purpose and builds to a final product. When you do that, and when you explain to students from the beginning that you are building to a final product, they tend to have much more buy-in.
Yeah.
Now, your students who have no buy-in no matter what, it's not going to change probably. But your students who are on the fence, and obviously your students who really want to meet your expectations and think they're producing the work that will meet them, but aren't, will be happy that you're being so explicit.
And it almost comes across as like a courtesy because you're telling them this is purposeful. We're not giving you busy work. This is why we're giving this to you. And I think students appreciate that transparency. And I think that contributes to the buy-in because they trust you a little bit more that you're not just making them do it for the sake of doing it.
Not wasting their time.
Yes.
And then they also know that if they put some effort into this assignment, and it may take a little while for you to build up to this, but if they put effort into the assignment, that they're going to come back to it at a later time. And so if they did a good job, then they're going to sort of reap rewards more than just the score on the assignment, that it's going to have this sort of like trickle down effect.
It's also helpful for you as a teacher because I know for us, you go through your credential program and you're taught to do long form lesson planning to be able to produce your standards, your objective at any time. Well, as an experienced teacher, you quickly learn, well, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to do that.
But not sustainable.
Right. But when you do have that kind of explicit purpose on the worksheet or the handout, if you do get visitors, if you do have someone come in, if you're getting observed, it is really easy to point to those directions and say, this is what we're doing and why, or more likely to have a student be able to say, this is what we're doing and why.
Yeah.
So it is just helpful to get that piece in there for you.
Absolutely.
The next thing we like to do is to give students a length requirement. If it doesn't matter, then fine, we don't include that, but we tend to be people who want to see a certain number of sentences. And so we will tell them it needs to be one sentence, it needs to be 5 sentences, whatever it is. We like to be very explicit because, as you probably know if you found this video, many students will just kind of write one word if they don't have that kind of direction. And so we like to be clear that this is the minimum we're looking to see.
We started to get into this habit when we were asking students multi-part questions and they were writing a single sentence in response. It's like when you ask somebody an either or question and they answer yes. Well,
you didn't really answer the question.
And so we found that rather than just continue to penalize the students for not doing what we expected them to do, if we said, you cannot answer this question in fewer than 3 sentences or whatever it was we expected, that those students who were writing a sentence not because they were being lazy or because they were being defiant or something like that, but they didn't understand what it was they were supposed to produce, were producing what we expected to see when we clarified for them
Yeah.
what it was.
And like to build on that, we also started to specify what format we wanted to see that take.
Mhm.
So if it's a complete sentence, I think it started there with some of our struggling students. We started to specify a sentence frame we wanted them to use,
Mhm.
which was not so much to like make things easier for them, but so that they would include all the parts we wanted to see. So they would
Mhm.
include the why or the because or whatever it
Mhm.
was. We then I think started moving toward even telling students we want to see it in this particular format. We want to use our 5 C's where you have your
Mhm.
claim, your evidence, your concrete evidence, your context.
Commentary.
Thank you, and your connection sentence. So just trying to give them that kind of like, this is what a good
Mhm.
response looks like. So follow these steps.
Absolutely. Because with things like sentence frames for students who are struggling to just even produce a single sentence response, they think they are writing a complete
Yes.
sentence. And maybe sometimes technically they are writing a
Yeah.
complete sentence, but it's not an acceptable response academically in terms of using your
Yeah.
language of the discipline in writing
Yeah.
for an educated audience.
Or just answering the question that was asked of you. Some of
Right.
their sentences are like, well, you got 1/3 of the question.
And then for students who are sort of AP bound or they're in AP, where you're really expecting to see essentially sort of a paragraph
Mhm.
response by letting them know, okay, this is how you answer a question, this is how
Mhm.
you support it, this is how you connect that support to your response. When you do that, you're helping them to build those
Mhm.
skills so that when they go to college or when they go into the business world
Mhm.
and somebody asks them to do something or to produce something, that they're able to see, okay, when you fully address what it is somebody wants you to address, you do it in this way with
Mhm.
this level of detail.
Yeah. And it's nice because it's a very straightforward format, but it's
Mhm.
one that works for a variety of levels.
Mhm. Mhm.
Along with that, we like to tell students explicitly what we're looking for in terms of evidence. So there's no question whether we mean quotations, whether we mean paraphrase, whether we mean
Mhm.
a detail. We also like to specify how is that formatted. Are you just dropping a quote in next to your question, which almost never is what we're asking for? Is it integrated into your writing? How is it punctuated? That sort of thing. And so we like to be very explicit about what we're
Mhm.
looking to see because then we grade it based on that and it
Right.
removes the question of whether that's required or not.
Right. And then it's fair when you say, oh, well, I asked you to integrate the quotation and I asked you to include a citation and you didn't do that. Well, they can't say, oh, I didn't know that's what you wanted.
Yeah.
Well, it was in the directions along with an example.
Yeah.
We often find that at the beginning of your assignment, for every
Yeah.
assignment, if you include an example of an integrated quotation, and you can use the
Yep.
exact same integrated quotation for the entire year if
I
that's what you
I
want
think
to
we
do.
do that per unit. It's like we choose
Hmm.
one for the first assignment and
Yep,
it's our
it's the
example for the
same
whole thing.
one.
It's always like a random sentence that they should
Yes.
never use as evidence. And
Mhm.
then it's fun when they do. And you're like, well, this is nonsense.
But it's just that good constant
Yeah.
reminder for them. We also like to include any definitions or clarifying phrases. Sometimes, if there is a word that is near or necessary for them to address the question
Mhm.
correctly, we'll include a definition for that. If the question is worded in such a way that we could see where students would maybe go in the wrong
Mhm.
direction, we'll often include an in other words
Mhm.
in order to sort of hint at this is where we
Mhm.
want you to be going with your response.
Yeah. And not only does that help all students, but specifically it helps for students who are absent or who
Mhm.
maybe weren't paying attention or whatever the case may be, and then are trying to complete it on their own
Mhm.
without you.
Mhm.
They still have some support in being able to do that. You don't get that problem of, well, I don't know what to do now. I wasn't
Mhm.
listening, I wasn't there, and trying to figure it out on your own.
Right. It also helps your students who may be English language
Mhm.
learners to have access to the same information worded in different ways.
Mhm.
It could be tapping into vocabulary that they are more familiar with, as often your in other
Yes.
words are simplified.
Yes. The final thing we like to include, and I guess final in general, I'm sure there are exceptions to that rule. Where in the text should they look for their response?
Mhm.
We've found, I think we used to want students to find it themselves,
Mhm.
and I don't know. The longer I taught, the more I was like, why? It doesn't matter. And
Right.
so we would specify a page, a paragraph number, a section of the text,
Mhm.
even on like a final assessment. It would be like, go back and look at this worksheet, go back and look at this part of the text, just because I mean, one, it saves time, it helps students be on the right track, but it's also helpful because like it's frustrating when they answer a question but it's not about the right part. Maybe you've embedded your questions in the text, and so you do it, you go to the end of a section for reading's sake, but then they answer based on the paragraph above the question,
Mhm.
and that's not what you wanted. And
Mhm.
so it helps to point students directly to the part of the text you're actually asking them to look at.
Right. There is value in having students seek out
Mhm.
information and putting your questions all at the end. But most often, when you are writing questions where you're really focused on what am I including in my directions, which is the purpose of the video, then you're really wanting them to be aware of the content that you
Yeah.
want them to lead them to. And so when you point them in the right direction,
Mhm.
then you're much more likely to get what it is you want them to see. So there may be value in putting your questions at the end of the text and the students have to search through and seek things out on their
Yeah.
own. But that's not the kind of questions that we're talking about
Yeah,
here.
and usually the questions we're asking in this context are meant to lead then to discussion or lead to the final product, and it's really nice then to make sure that everyone's on the same page. It's hard to
Mhm.
have a discussion when we're all over the place and maybe
Right.
nobody found the section we actually
Right.
wanted them to look at.
Right. So we hope that you found this valuable. If you put it into place in your classroom on your next classroom assignment, we would love to know how it works out for you. If you have a tip that we did not think about, please share it with us in the comments down below. We look forward to hearing from you and talking more with you soon. Bye.
Bye.
So the first thing we like to do when we start our directions,
That was so good, Kate.
oh, flippin' heck, man.
You two are the worst.
Lay down, both of you. Lay down. Gemma, lay down. Zelda, in the bed. In the bed. Get in the bed. Get in the bed.
And now you can use this as a reel for what it's like trying to make your students follow directions.
Yeah. At least this one is following directions. The bad one is following directions. The little one thinks she's above directions.
I mean, that's on par with how she's always
Yeah.
been.
Hop up in there. Get in there. Okay.